Hey everybody, Matt here. Thanks for stopping by and welcome to Imagine Then Make. So in this video, I want to talk to you about a subject that's really near and dear to my heart, and that is prototyping. I've done prototyping for years and years, both professionally and also just in my own personal workshop. So in this video, I want to walk you through the sequence of steps that I went through in my most recent project. Alright, so let me start by trying to describe the problem I was trying to solve. We have a machine where I work that has long metal plates. I just have a piece of wood to kind of simulate that. And these plates get sprayed unintentionally with an abrasive compound that's used while the machine is actually running. And we don't want these plates to get covered up with that compound. It makes a big mess, and it also forces the machine operator to clean off the plates. So the problem at hand was to try and design something very simple that could be put on these plates to basically cover them up. So another important piece to this problem is that on these big long metal plates, there's a fixture that rises vertically. It gets mounted onto these metal plates, and every time the machine is reset up to work with a different part, this big tall fixture may have to get moved to another position on the plate. So whatever we use to cover up the plate so it doesn't get all gunked up with the compound, whatever we use there, it has to be very easily put into place and then also removed so the machine can be reset up with these fixtures in different positions. So that's another important part of the solution. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, I kind of hinted at it in the last clip, whatever we use to cover up these plates, it has to be very easy to use, easy to put into place and easy to remove. Otherwise, the guys that need to use these covers are just not going to use them. That's just human nature, right? So what I've tried to do here is outline the constraints for the solution. Every time I look at prototyping a solution to a problem, before I do anything, I really have to understand the problem. So in this case, I needed to come up with some covers for these metal plates that are easy on, easy off. As an extra little piece, they need to be relatively inexpensive because we would need a whole bunch of them. And they have to be easily cleanable because they're covering up the metal plate, so the metal plate doesn't get compound on them, but the covers are going to have the compound sprayed onto them, so they have to be easily cleanable. So the point here is that whenever I do any prototyping, the very first step is to really understand the problem. Alright, so hopefully you have a basic understanding of the problem. Now I'm going to show you a sequence of very crude prototypes that I used to try and imagine the most proper solution to this problem. So the very first thing I did was just take some ordinary corrugated cardboard and kind of bent it into a U. And the idea is that the U would kind of straddle the metal plates. I'd have a number of these to go right down the whole length of the metal plate. And so this is kind of where I started. And then from here, I went to something that was a little bit firmer. Okay. Same basic idea. It's kind of a U that straddles the plate, and it has some thickness, some width to it. So from this, I went to something a little bit thicker. Okay, and the reason I did that is kind of beyond the conversation here, but there are some holes in these plates, and I wanted this side of one of the covers and this side of the same cover to fall right in between the holes. It's hard to make sense of that, but that was kind of the thinking there. So what I'm just showing you is I went from simple corrugated cardboard to, I think this is like chipboard that's wrapped up with masking tape. Here's some more chipboard, but the idea here was to try and determine the right width so that the edges fall between the holes that are in the metal plates. Then from the chipboard, I went to kind of a sandwich of scrap materials. This happens to be MDF, this is particle board, and this is Luan. And the whole idea here was that, again, I cut the same kind of U shape on a bandsaw here in my workshop, and I just glued the pieces together and just kind of sanded the edges and so on. And it basically is the same basic idea. Now you can imagine that if I had a bunch of these, we'll take this one as a second one. Okay, what's to keep them together? You know, that if they somehow separate, this is an exaggerated amount, but if they somehow separate by this much, now there's a big gap here and the compound can fall into the gap, and now you've got kind of a stripe of compound on the metal plate, which is not what we want. So I thought of a bunch of different ways to try and secure these together. Again, trying to be inexpensive and easy to clean and easy to use. We actually did try Velcro, but we found that Velcro got clogged up by the compound, and after a while it just wasn't effective anymore. So then I went to the next step. And the next step was to use some small button magnets. Now at this point, I'm pretty heavy into figuring out a workable solution. Okay, this didn't happen all in one day. Okay, so by the time I got to this point, I actually realized that I needed two different widths. So, and I decided to color code them so it's easier for the machine operator to understand which one's the skinny one or the narrow one and which one's the wider one. So the red one's the skinny one or narrow one, and the blue one is the wider one, and it's obviously a big difference in color. And then to keep them stuck together, what I did was I just used some button magnets here. Okay, so when they're installed on the metal plate, they just click together and they're held in place by the magnets. Okay, so another piece of this which I really haven't discussed, but this is the beginning of the chain of covers, and the beginning here is made out of steel. So the first cover that goes on the metal plate is the narrow one, the red one, and it has button magnets so that as it comes up against the very first part here, it sticks to it because this part is steel. So the magnets will grab onto that, and then you put as many blue ones on as you need to go down the length of the metal plate. And then at the very end, if you happen to have a little section that's not covered, you can take an additional red one and stick it right there, and now you've got this series of U-shaped covers all held in place by really inexpensive button magnets. And so that was my proposed solution. So at this point, I hope you can appreciate the sort of the transitional steps here. And for me, this is a lot of fun because it forces me to think through a whole bunch of different potential solutions and to kind of rule them out, run the pros and cons, and then come up with the next variation. So this is what I mean by prototyping. Again, it's a subject near and dear to my heart. So now you might be wondering, what's the end of the story? Well, I presented my solution, and I demonstrated my red and blue prototypes here with the button magnets, and my idea was very warmly received. And then another group of people, another department, took this idea, and what they were going to try and do is go the next step, which would be to 3D print a bunch of these red ones and a whole bunch of these blue ones, again with pockets or something so that magnets could be installed. And then those 3D printed ones could be actually tried on the machine as sort of a test. So at this point, I've kind of lost touch with how that's coming along. Hopefully that will actually happen, and hopefully these will become useful covers that the operators will actually want to use. So that's as much of the end of the story as I know. The bottom line to all of this is that if you have an idea for some kind of a gadget or just anything, I hope that you'll see that you can start with very simple materials and work on some kind of a prototype, some sort of a proof of concept, some kind of a model, some kind of a simulation for your idea. I find it a tremendous amount of fun going through that process, and who knows, maybe you will too. And just one last quick thought. I'm pretty sure I heard, I'll have to try and look it up, and if I find it, I'll leave a link in the video description. But I'm pretty sure that the guy that invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner had gone through, I want to say, hundreds of prototypes. And I believe he started with cardboard. You know, so as silly as this might look to some of you, sometimes some really great things can happen as a result of working through the process.